Thank you, John. Before I tell you the story of Derek Black, you need to understand his father's story in order to appreciate how deeply embedded Derek's family is in white supremacy. Derek's father, Don Black, joined the youth branch of the American Nazi Party as a teenager. Attending his first Nazi conference while still in high school, he met David Duke. Yes, that David Duke, the famous KKK leader, and they became lifelong friends. At the age of 22, Don Black was initiated into the Klan, and in 1979, he became Grand Wizard, a post Black would hold for a decade. After spending 3 years in federal prison for plotting violence, Don Black decided to slow down and reassess the best method to achieve his goals. Perhaps violence was counterproductive. So he became more suspicious and more careful in not inciting violence so he wouldn't end up in prison again. After his release in 1984, he swore off the Klan and began more nuanced tactics, traveling the country doing interviews and radio programs. In 1988, Don married David Duke's ex-wife, Chloe. It might seem a little weird to us, but David Duke served as best man at their wedding, and Duke also became the godfather and mentor for Derek Black, their son, who was born about a year later. So let me review that little crazy scenario in case you didn't quite catch it all. Derek Black, who's the subject of the talk today, his godfather is David Duke. His mother was David Duke's ex-wife, and his father remained close friends with David Duke throughout this time, and they're still friends. By 1995, Don Black had founded the Internet's first major racial hate site, Stormfront, which still advances neo-Nazi ideas, Holocaust denial, anti-immigrant, and other racist attitudes. Chloe worked to support the family, and Don devoted full time to his propaganda efforts. So this is the world into which Derek Black was born. Derek was not just a kid who happened to stumble on Stormfront on the internet. This was his heritage. Derek attended school until he finished 3rd grade. Then his parents pulled him out of his West Palm Beach, Florida public school, where they believed the school was being overrun with Haitians and Hispanics. Derek, by that time, was conducting his own children's page on his father's website. At age 10, Derek wrote, "I am no longer attacked by gangs of non-whites. I am learning pride in myself, my family, and my people." During his years of homeschooling, Derek began to realize that white nationalism could not grow into a viable political movement unless it adopted a new language, sanitized from a history of violence. And this is kind of his father's philosophy, too. On a radio program with his father, Derek claimed that white nationalists were not fighting against minority rights, but fighting for their own rights. In Derek's mind, white nationalism wasn't a fringe racist movement, but something much more forceful, noble, even patriotic. And remember, too, here he is being homeschooled by his father, and his father is sitting at one desk running the Stormfront website, and Derek is sitting at a desk right next to him doing his homework. This is a key concept. Oh, I did that. A few months before the election of Barack Obama, Don saw that the Stormfront website beginning to grow by a few thousand registered users every month. Derek saw the tide begin to turn. There was a growing swell of white dissatisfaction that could not be quelled by political correctness. In 2010, Derek began his own show on AM radio, and it quickly became the most downloaded on the station, and his time slot expanded from 1 day to 5. Derek, by this time, had completed 2 years of study at a local community college and decided to apply to transfer to New College in Florida, which was an honor college where he planned to double major in German and medieval history. Now you can understand the German, that's Nazi, right? And the medieval history because that time period is considered to be the time when white culture was at its zenith. Derek's father didn't worry about him being overly influenced by the liberal bias of his professors or fellow students, Don said. It's not like any of those little commies are going to impact his thinking. If anyone is going to be influenced here, it'll be them. The first person Derek met on campus was Juan Elias, a Peruvian foreign student, the kind of person Derek felt was ruining the country. But Derek had been taught to be kind and polite in one-on-one interactions, so Juan thought Derek was okay, just a little eccentric in the way he dressed with long hair and a wide-brimmed black hat. Derek made the decision to live as anonymously as possible on campus, secretly calling into his own radio talk show 5 mornings a week, where he discussed the criminal nature of blacks or the inferior natural intelligence of blacks and Hispanics. Derek knew that if his views were known on campus, he would be vilified in the student email group known as the Forum. While Derek and Juan sat in the courtyard doing homework one day, Matthew Stevenson joined them. Matthew was the only Orthodox Jew on campus. Derek believed that Jews were not white, but Derek found Matthew to be funny and bright, with an interest in early world history like Derek. Soon the three were friends, and Derek was actively hiding his views, claiming he didn't know about the website Stormfront. So he had enough sense to know that his views would be highly controversial in this setting, so he was hiding them. Derek did well in his classes, got along well with everyone, and began to feel that he was fitting in with these other bright young people. He met a girl named Rose his first weekend on campus, and they spent a lot of time together. He hesitated to get too involved with her, however, after he learned she was Jewish. She helped him with his math homework, which he had neglected. Derek found her to be sweet and unassuming, at odds with what he had written on his website about Jews and being the cause of the world's strife and misery. She liked him, and she had no idea of his background. After his first semester at New College, Derek attended an immersive language school in Germany, where he visited his godfather and mentor, David Duke, who was living in the European Alps. And that's a whole other story about nationalism in Europe. Meanwhile, a student back at New College was working on his senior thesis on domestic extremism and ran across a picture of a young man who looked familiar. Soon the student forum was flooded with emails, hundreds before the end of the day. Derek's writings and radio broadcasts were available to any student who searched for them. Everyone knew within hours that another student at their college was a leading white nationalist. Derek followed every word of their exchange from Germany. Some people wanted to get him kicked out of college. Others noted that he had not acted in a violent or insulting way. What was the best response to intolerance? Exclusion or inclusion? Derek was used to getting hate mail from strangers, but now he was getting negative feedback from friends. He holed up for 3 days in his room in Munich, reading emails in the forum. He was mourning all the relationships he had lost, especially Rose. They talked on Skype. She had become a focus of derision on campus because of her relationship with him. He tried to explain that he was a white nationalist, not a white supremacist. She listened to him for an hour, but none of his sanitized prejudices made any sense to her. She ended the call in tears. For Derek, this was the first big turning point in his conversion. In the past, the victims of his rhetoric had been faceless enemies, but now he had seen the harm it caused to real people firsthand. Rose was offended. Rose felt oppressed by his worldview. Rose had her reputation on campus damaged by association with him. His views hurt someone, not his actions, just his words. After consulting with David Duke, Derek decided not to run away. He would return to campus and speak out about his beliefs and maybe recruit other students to Stormfront. Meanwhile, students hotly debated how to handle Derek when he returned from Germany. Many decided on a path of exclusion, kicking him out of clubs and organizations, glaring at him in the dining hall. Then Derek got a text message from Matthew Stevenson, who invited Derek to join their Friday night Shabbat dinner. Matthew understood why excluding Derek was the wrong strategy. Matthew was an observant Jew who was living within a student body made up of liberal, anti-capitalist atheists, and his own feelings of rejection had only reinforced his conservative religious and political views. Matthew Stevenson understood that exclusion would harden Derek's racist attitudes. Matthew knew the best route to change Derek's views was inclusion. Thus began a weekly dinner with a few friends. Matthew didn't try to build a case against Derek's views. He merely wanted to show him that Jews were people too. Derek was polite and quiet and laughed at Matthew's sarcastic jokes. Other students, however, engaged with Derek online, asking him questions about his views, stating some facts that slowly began to make Derek rethink some issues. Derek had always assumed white privilege was just a conspiracy to make whites feel guilty about their success. When a representative from the Southern Poverty Law Center was on campus, Derek heard many other students describe how they felt persecuted on campus. Derek had dismissed his rejection as an overreaction from hysterical classmates, but now he was beginning to wonder if this many smart students who were hurt by his beliefs could all be wrong. All this time, a girl, Allison Gornick, became intensely interested in Derek. She was a psychology major who could not understand how there could be such a chasm between how he acted and what he believed. His mild and kind personality belied his hateful and oppressive beliefs. She was reluctant to befriend him, however, wondering if it was even morally acceptable to do so. Dating him, of course, was out of the question. Gradually, they did become friends, and gradually his views evolved. He eventually admitted that Jews, okay, I guess they are white, and he no longer understood why other white nationalists saw them as a problem. During summer vacation, Allison and Derek might spend 6 or 7 hours in a conversation as she put forth rational, fact-based arguments against some of his most dearly held notions. She made him think. Some days she was nearly nauseated by propaganda on Stormfront that made Hitler sound like a hero. Gays were degenerates, and women were possessions. She sometimes grew angry and frustrated with Derek, but she never gave up. And finally, he invited her to attend a white nationalist conference with him. She decided she needed to fully understand this movement, so she went. Derek spoke at the conference. Although he had not significantly shifted his views, he now understood another perspective. He knew his words could often hurt, alienate, and oppress others. So he modified his speech, focusing on ways to protect the white race from extinction. Derek got a standing ovation. His parents were glowing. Allison saw how deeply loved and admired Derek was within the white nationalist movement. His father clearly expected Derek to be a future leader, taking over Stormfront someday. Nevertheless, she saw small changes in him, so she believed he could make the full conversion. She pelted him with articles and data showing that there were no biological differences among the races. Indeed, race itself is a mushy, unscientific concept with no actual validity. "Your stupid theory makes no sense," she told him. He saw she was essentially right. She also told him she was falling for him. He had been infatuated with her from the beginning. They had to work out their differences or the relationship had no future. Derek had taken the graduate record examination and scored in the 97th percentile for verbal reasoning. His professors at New College recommended him for one of the most elite graduate programs for medieval studies at Western Michigan. This move would help him make the final break. I think he is now in a doctorate program at the University of Chicago. For a while, Derek held two opposing points of view in his mind, but the cognitive dissonance became unbearable. Now, when he listened to his father's rants, they sounded uninformed and cruel. Derek knew that he had expressed such callousness, ignorance, and cruelty himself. He could no longer live with such views, but he loved his father and mother. He went home one weekend to tell them, but he couldn't get the words out. With Allison's encouragement, he wrote a public letter, sent it to the Southern Poverty Law Center, and let them publish it. His father was sure someone had hacked Derek's email account. Derek had to tell his father the letter was real. His mother was hysterical. His father devastated. Derek's disavowal of white nationalism was, in his father's words, nails to the heart. There were other media news reports about his transformation. After Eli Saslow's book was published, Derek was interviewed by Trevor Noah on his television show. Perhaps some of you have seen it. Derek was asked if he might return to his old beliefs someday, but Derek explained that he had seen how his beliefs had hurt real people. And this insight made it impossible for him to return to his old ways of thinking. This story of conversion holds many revelations, I think. Whatever our own views, we cannot escape the fact that a former KKK Grand Wizard and the former wife of David Duke raised a son who was essentially a good person. Derek was polite, kind, hardworking, intelligent, and nonviolent. Derek thought of himself as a good person who would not willingly hurt other people. The students and professors at New College saw these decent qualities in Derek. Recruiters for hate groups often target young men who have been bullied, who are angry, and who felt rejected from society in some way, who are seeking to belong to a greater cause. It's not uncommon for their parents to claim their sons were wonderful, loving, happy children. We often lump all white nationalists into a basket of deplorables. Derek's story reminds us people are complex creatures, few of whom are totally good or bad. It may challenge our own biases to imagine maybe there are good people on both sides. Another obvious lesson for us is that inclusion, not exclusion, is the best path if we want to change someone's views. How difficult it is to befriend someone whose ideology we despise. It seems almost immoral to do so. But Matthew Stevenson, the Orthodox Jew at New College, he did just that. He and Allison are the real heroes in this story. They saw Derek's good qualities and persisted for more than 2 years, slowly challenging his views. I don't believe Derek could have ever risked losing the love of his parents if he did not have the assurance of new love in his life. The love of Allison in particular, but also the love of other friends like Matthew Stevenson. We are reminded again that conversion involves grief. Derek felt substantial grief due to the pain he caused his parents when he left white nationalism. Derek needed support from good friends to get through that period. When most students had given up hope of ever changing Derek, Matthew Stevenson held firm. Matthew said, "The basic principle is that it's our job to push the rock, not necessarily to move the rock."